Hello, my name is DJ Chuang, the Director of Christian Asian Mental Health, and I want to share with you 5 ingredients that can make your church known for being a place that cares and supports for people that struggle with mental health. And those 5 ingredients all start with the letter S for those of you that love alliterations. Sermons, stories, seminars, support groups, and Sabbath. Now let me share with you where I'm coming from. I am someone with lived experience with mental health struggles. I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder 23 years ago during a difficult job transition. And that was at the age of 35. And it's very likely when I look back at my life, I probably struggled with depression and other mental health challenges for much of my life, but never sought help because of the shame and stigma growing up in a traditional Chinese family. But thanks be to God, I was able to receive the help I needed to recover. I stayed on my medication, I got talk therapy, I made lifestyle changes, I applied all kinds of sleep hygiene as well as other kinds of hygiene, and I have to be intent about my self-care to stay healthy for my own wellness and to be a blessing to others. And over that period of time, I've also studied and researched and learned quite a bit about mental health because I need to do that for my self-care. And because of my background in pastoral ministry and church consulting, I also want to find ways to help the church. So God's used all of my experiences and brought all that together. And this checklist is something that I've synthesized as a way that the churches that you're a part of, the church that I'm a part of, can make a big difference in the global crisis that we're in the midst of today with mental health. It's not just a crisis here in America, it's around the world. And it's been accelerated and exacerbated by the coronavirus pandemic. Now, why is the church at such a prime opportunity? Well, one, the need is urgent, and the mental health care system is just not enough to meet the needs. There's issues of accessibility and affordability and availability that just not enough people are able to get to the help they need. Secondly, the church is the only place that gathers people on a weekly basis. I was part of a Stop Stigma Summit last October with some of the national leaders brainstorming and collaborating how do they address the issue of stigma, because that is one of the major barriers that keeps people from getting the help they need when it comes to mental health care. And they came up with lots of different ideas and programs and campaigns and resources and conferences that are helpful, but they don't gather people. And my aha moment there was when people gather together in a supportive environment, that can accelerate their experience of healing and belonging. And I'll mention how that works in a later point during this video. And then thirdly, the church taps into the power of God. And I know for me, in the midst of my mental health struggle, I could use all the help I could get, practical, physical, medical, and spiritual. And ironically, 70% of Americans identify as being religious, and yet in psychology and psychiatry, they avoid talking about the spiritual resources that are available. In the church, we serve millions of people here in America and around the world, and we have a prime opportunity to meet the greatest felt need of our generation and in our time. And we can simply walk and take those steps by adding these 5 ingredients as a part of our church. So let me get into the 5 ingredients and explain to you how they work. So number 1, sermons. Sermons stop stigma. Dr. Ed Stetzer, prominent author and church leader in America here, he describes that while we've started talking about mental illness, there's still a huge stigma associated with it. And so sermons are the one place that addresses everyone in the church and helps us get that biblical and spiritual grounding and that authority to speak to our mental health condition. It's part of our human condition. The Bible talks about many times about anxiety and worry, depression, grief, and loss. And in today's world, we kind of put all of that under the bucket of mental health. And so when our sermons speak to mental health, it stops the stigma. And we need that stigma to be removed so that people feel more free to get the help they need instead of suffering needlessly. Number 2, stories. Stories erase shame. Dr. Brené Brown is a popular best-selling author, shame researcher, and expert, and she describes that shame festers in silence. So the opposite of that would be honest and healthy conversations. So when we are able to share stories and hear stories of those who have experienced the shame of having a mental illness diagnosis and recover through it by accepting healthcare, by making adjustments in their lifestyle, picking up healthy habits, and living by faith, that helps us to know we're not alone. There is hope, and it's okay to get help. Those are 3 things that helped me get through my own mental health recovery, and hearing stories helps us to know we're not just a problem, we're people with a problem. Hearing from experts is helpful, but hearing from people with experiences is more helpful. That's the power of stories. Number 3, seminars. Seminars educate everyone. So there are skills and knowledge that we need to learn about managing our mental health. It's not something that I recall learning in high school or college. It's certainly not anything that we talked about at our home. And so the church can be a great place for education and provide seminars and workshops to help us learn things about taking care of ourselves and one another. And this is a great opportunity for your church to collaborate and partner with Christian counselors in your area so that they provide their expertise into your congregation. Number 4, support groups. Support groups tangibly care for one another. Just as the scripture exhorts us to carry one another's burden, support groups are a great way to show that support through a weekly rhythm. And I've been privileged, I've been honored, I've been blessed to be part of a support group, especially over the past 2 years, co-hosting one with Saddleback Church, my home church. And we use a very simple yet powerful curriculum published by Mental Health Grace Alliance. Joe Padilla is one of the other speakers at this Thrive and Cultivate Summit. I encourage you to listen to his talk. And it's a 16-week workbook. There's one Living Grace and one called Family Grace that we've used to help those individuals that struggle with mental health, as well as family and friends who care and support those that struggle with mental health. And I literally read the workbook word for word and listen empathetically without judgment. And we've seen dozens of people feel cared for and supported in their mental health journey. They've grown in their resilience and perseverance. The chapters are based in neuroscience as well as scripture. So there's a great integration of all that God provides for us for holistic living and healing. And we've even seen discipleship happen as new leaders have grown in their faith, found their purpose, and experienced healing together. Dr. Thomas Insel, who used to be the director of the National Institute for Mental Health, recently wrote a book titled Healing. And in his many years in the mental health care system and industry, he realized just treating symptoms is not enough. For long-term recovery, 3 things are needed, and they all start with the letter P. People, place, and purpose. And you know what? That sounds so much like the church, and expressed in something like a support group really helps your church to realize, hey, we're here to care for one another. You can activate your lay people with lived experience, and it just takes a couple hours of preparation to implement this program. So the need is urgent, the solution is simple, and I highly recommend that curriculum, and I've compiled a list of others. Feel free to hit me up. Happy to share that with you. And let's see, we've talked about sermons, stories, seminars, support groups, and number 5 is Sabbath. Sabbath gives us a healthy rhythm of life. God demonstrated for us, he rested on the 7th day after creating the world in 6 days. It's in our 10 commandments, and yet in our 24/7 world, we often don't have that habit of Sabbath. I confess it's a new habit for me to take a day to unplug, enjoy God's creation and nature, use my other muscles besides my brain and my mind, and help me reconnect with God. And so Sabbath, make that a part of your church rhythm, especially for those of you in church leadership. We know that church ministry work never ends, but God is always at work, even when we don't see it or feel it. So we too should follow the example of God to take time to Sabbath and rest. So that's the 5 S's. Sermons, stories, seminars, support groups, and Sabbath. And I compiled this list to be simple and very doable, and it's a part of the ministry that I'm part of launching called Christian Asian Mental Health. And it's our prayer and our hope that we can introduce this and come alongside of churches, provide concierge level collaboration and partnership to help the 9,000 churches here in America to incorporate these ingredients, to reach the 2 billion people in Asia where mental health is definitely a crisis and there's not a lot of solution. In the church can be a big part of helping people experience more and more of the abundant life that is promised in Jesus Christ. And that's my prayer for you. That's a prayer for us. Can you imagine the day when the church is known for being a safe place that welcomes and cares for people that struggle with mental health and experience more of God's abundant life? To him be the praise and glory. Thank you for watching the video. Love to connect with you. Drop me a line. Bye-bye.